I have this suspicion that people like Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan and Hillary Clinton, they wanted this Ukraine debacle all along. And all of this, and you read in these documents, demonize the Russians. Demonize the Russians the same way we did over the Olympics. That's actually what it says in some of these emails. And they talk about running these media campaigns on the American people to predicate what seems to me a proxy war against the Russians. And in this case, they're doing so on the territory of the Ukrainian state. Hillary, of course, didn't win, but it seems as far back as the summer of 2016, this was already the plan. So it's and I'll defer to you, but it seems to me as though what we're seeing take place on the battlefield in Ukraine right now is actually something that goes far, far back into the past and has been a plan of these globalists all along.
Oh, listen, Jack, you're absolutely right. The truth of the matter is that once Putin came to power in Russia and demonstrated that he was going to go after the oligarchs that were essentially raping Russia, raping its financial wealth, raping its natural wealth, its mineral resources. People like Bill Browder, who's a perfect example of what was in the country at the time in the late 90s, early part of Putin's rule. These people wanted to destroy Russia. They wanted to rape it. They wanted to divide it up. And ultimately, they wanted to remove Putin. And they were shocked when Putin came in and was able to turn this country around. I mean, Russia was circling the drain. He's now made it a great power, and he's capitalized on this war that he didn't want, but we started by weaponizing Ukraine and turning it into a battering ram against Russia and its people. But all the people that did that are still with us, Jack. Most of them are still in the Central Intelligence Agency. Most of them are operating inside the State Department. And the Hill, which has a cocktail level of familiarity with everything, they know a lot about everything and nothing about anything. They're still saddled up with all the same people believing all the lies, which is another reason nothing changes, along, of course, with the widespread corruption that ensures everyone is paid handsomely for their support of bad policy.
Well, and many of those oligarchs that you mentioned that were set up during really the Yeltsin administration in Russia during the 1990s was done so with the backing of then President Bill Clinton. He was the one who was driving this policy. So rather than try to work with Russia and bring Russia into NATO, bring Russia into some kind of security agreement with the West or Western Europe at the time, the idea was that which was the publicly stated plan. Instead, it became this new goal of trying to strip the resources and extract whatever economic value they could from Russia. And so much of this, by the way, goes into the Clinton Foundation and their dealings as well.
Oh, you're 100% on target, Jack. What I would add is that I was involved in the Balkan fiasco, both in Bosnia and then heavily involved, obviously, in what happened in Kosovo. And I can tell you a couple of things that the people that were involved with those things, people like Tony Blinken, they were understudying Madeleine Albright, Strobe Talbot, Sandy Berger, Al Gore, the people that are really driving the insanity in the Balkans. It's a very sad story, but the real goal at the time in the Balkans was first, we're going to sweep away everyone who opposes us in the Balkans. Then we're going to turn Yugoslavia into some sort of fiefdom that we govern through some puppet. And then finally, we're going to start this great revolution that's going to change everything, regime change everyone, all the way to Moscow. I was told that point blank. And we knew, everybody in the Pentagon knew very well that going into the Balkans was very dangerous. It's not only is it a place where nothing survives contact, the place is impenetrable and incapable of fundamentally changing in the ways that everybody would like. But it's more important than that. It's part of Russia's area of what I call insecurity. The Russians helped to liberate the Balkans from the Turks. And the people in the Balkans are, for the most part, as a result, pro-Russian. They're grateful to the Orthodox Christian power that rescued them from Islam. When we go in there, we're actually operating on their turf. And that's what we've done in Ukraine. And the outcome is that now Russia is fully militarized. It's stronger than it's ever been. It's got the best army it's fielded, certainly since the early 80s, late 70s. I would argue it's even better. It's got better technology. It's infinitely more capable than anything we field right now. And that's very dangerous because we have a lot of people in Washington that continue to talk loosely about this thing called war, Jack. Is scary. None of these people know what the hell they're talking about. None of them have been to war, operating out of a forward operating base in Iraq or Afghanistan and doing a few patrols. That's not war. The people that have seen most of the action in these places are special operations forces. And, that's a kind of warfare, but that's not decisive in wars between great powers. So now we're talking about war with Russia. That's where we are right now.
Well, and we saw just last night, and I was watching some of this footage, Telegram and different channels where I can get access to it. Massive bombardment of Kiev, of the capital of Ukraine, by the Russians in response to a lot that's going on the Eastern Front, something 300 drones combined with missiles, which is strange because I was told by all of the Western military experts that Russia was going to run out of missiles and run out of drones and that they had no capacity. And yet they seem perfectly capable of being able to strike anywhere in Ukraine with almost impunity through the air. And at the same time, we see Russian forces enveloping city after city on the Eastern Front right now as we speak, here in the end of July.
Well, I guess Americans will eventually figure out that Santa Claus died in the same car accident that killed the Good Fairy and the Easter Bunny. Look, we've been lied to about everything about Russia. The Russians have been very methodical, very deliberate, and they had to build up a much larger force to deal with the threat in Ukraine than they anticipated. They've done that. And that force is a modern 21st century force with massive emphasis on strike linked to intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance from seabed to space. And so what they're doing to avoid casualties is systematically moving forward and annihilating everything that Ukraine has left on the battlefield. Now, that was always one of their objectives, but it is finished to this point almost completely. You're looking at 1.5 to 1.8 million dead Ukrainian soldiers, another million or two that were wounded, most of whom will never return to duty because Ukraine hasn't got the medical infrastructure in its armed forces to save lives. So this whole thing is collapsing, it's falling apart, but the Russians aren't taking any chances. They are systematically vacuuming up everything they run into, and it either surrenders or dies. And they are now prepared to move on Kiev. It's something they haven't wanted to do, but I think they realize now that this is cancer. This is the kind of cancer that you see with tumors. And cutting out the tumor is not enough. You've got to go around the tissue that is connected to the tumor to make sure the margins are clear. And that means you've got to cross the Dnieper River, you've got to go into Kiev, and you've got to take Odessa. And we're going to watch these happen in the next month or two. How rapidly, I don't know, but they're not going to take any unnecessary casualties. We think the Russians have lost perhaps 120,000 men. We think that their auxiliaries with the Chechens and some of the auxiliaries out of Donetsk, Luhansk, probably another 20,000. Well, if you compare 200 or 160 or 70,000 to 1.8 million dead, that's a horrific exchange ratio. It's the kind of ratio that we saw at the end of World War II between the Germans, us, and the Russians. Because as the Germans fell apart and they had to fall back, they took terrible casualties, and that's what's happening now.